Welcome back to the channel, and today I am reading an excerpt from Matthew Stover's Star Wars Revenge of the Sith novelization, released back with the movie in 2005 and watched over and looked over by George. And basically what George would do with these books is he'd work with an author who knows how to write a chapter book and basically give the full-fledged cut of each movie in the novelization, because you get in the characters' heads and you see everything much clearer in the novels, because he really built upon the complexity of the movies and just grew from that, because the movies are already complex on their own, but then when you read the novels it gets even more complicated and more real. So it's a very amazing experience reading these books, because everything becomes so clear. George's vision, Star Wars, the lore, the characters, how they act, everything is just there, in every single one of these books. So without further ado, today we are reading The Tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. We're reading that whole scene in here, and you're going to see how he added dialogue, he added, descriptions on Anakin's thoughts, and there's all sorts of things. And this book is literally, mostly the entire book is just 1000% interesting, which is, cool, because I don't know how many books there are where every single page is interesting. It's a very, very rare find, but a novel by Matthew Stover is an absolute necessary purchase for any Star Wars fan. I'm reading out of the collection with all three prequel books, because it's just cheaper for me to get all three in one. So it's the Revenge of the Sith novel by Matthew Stover. So it's really cool. Without further ado, let's get into it. Two masked, robed, silent red guards flanked the door to the Chancellor's private box at the Galaxy's Opera House. Anakin didn't need to speak. As he approached, one of them said, "You are expected," and opened the door. The small round box had only a handful of seats overlooking the spread of overdressed beings who filled every seat in the orchestra. On this opening night, it seemed everyone had forgotten there was a war on. Anakin barely gave a glance toward the immense sphere of shimmering water that rippled gently in the stage's artificial zero-G. He had no interest in the ballet, Mon Calamari or otherwise. In the dim, semi-gloom, Palpatine sat with the Speaker of the Senate, Masamita, and his administrative aide, Sly Moore. Anakin stopped at the back of the box. Then this is Anakin's thoughts. If I were the spy the council wants me to be, I suppose I should be creeping up behind them so that I can listen in. Then we're back to reality. A spasm of distaste passed over his face. He took care to wipe it off before he spoke. "Chancellor, sorry I'm late." Palpatine turned toward him. His face lit up. "Yes, Anakin, don't worry. Come in, my boy, come in. Thank you for your report on the council meeting this afternoon. It made the most interesting reading. And now I have good news for you. Clone intelligence has finally located General Grievous." "That's tremendous." Anakin shook his head, wondering if Obi-Wan would be embarrassed to have been scooped by the clones. "He won't escape us again." "I'm going to... More, take a note. I will direct the council to give you this assignment, Anakin. Your gifts are wasted on Coruscant. You should be out in the field. You can attend council meetings by holoconference." Anakin frowned. "Thank you, sir, but the council coordinates Jedi assignment." Blech. "Thank you, sir, but the council coordinates Jedi assignments." Of course. Mustn't step on any Jedi toes, must we? They are so jealous of their political prerogatives. Still, I shall wonder at their collective wisdom if they choose someone else. As I said in my report, they've already assigned Obi-Wan to find Grievous. And then Anakin said, "Because they want to keep me here. Where am I supposed to spy on you?" Back to reality. To find him, yes, but you are the best man to apprehend him. Though, of course, the Jedi Council cannot always be trusted to do the right thing. They try. I believe they try, sir. Do you still... Sit down. Palpatine looked at the other two beings in the box. Leave us. They rose and withdrew. Anakin took Mas Amedda's seat. Palpatine gazed... Okay, that's a line. Sorry, I'm going to break the... for a minute. Anakin took Mas Amedda's seat. That is symbolism, because who is Mas Amedda? He is Palpatine's right hand during the Republic, and then it shows him being replaced, by Anakin, and Darth Vader's now Palpatine's right hand during the Empire. Of course, Mas Amedda is still there, but he has a different role. So I just thought that's a cool little snippet that they put. Even in one sentence, it gives so much just cool, I guess, connecting. Palpatine gazed distractedly down at the graceful undulations of the Mon Calamari principal soloist for a long moment, frowning as though there was so much he wanted to say he was unsure where to begin. Finally, he sighed heavily and leaned close to Anakin. Anakin, I think you know by now that I cannot rely upon the Jedi Council. That is why I put it on you first. What the heck am I doing? That is why I put you on it. If they have not yet tried to use you in their plot, they soon will. Anakin kept his face carefully blank. I'm not sure I understand. You must sense what I have come to suspect, Anakin, Palpatine said grimly. The Jedi Council is after more than independence from Senate oversight. I believe they intend to control the Republic itself. Chancellor, I believe they are planning treason. They hope to overthrow my government and replace me with someone weak enough that Jedi mind tricks can control his every word. I can't believe the Council. Anakin, search your feelings. You do know, don't you? Anakin looked away. I know they don't trust you, or the Senate, or the Republic, or democracy itself, for that matter. The Jedi Council is not elected. It selects its own members according to its own rules. A less generous man than I might say whim, and gives them authority backed by power. They rule the Jedi as they hope to rule the Republic, by fiat. I admit, Anakin looks down at his hands, my faith in them has been shaken. How? Have they approached you already? Have they ordered you to do something dishonest? Palpatine's frown cleared into a gently wise smile that was oddly reminiscent of Yoda's. They want you to spy on me, don't they? It's all right, Anakin. I have nothing to hide. I don't know what to say. Do you remember? Palpatine said, drawing away from Anakin so that he could lean back comfortably in his seat. How as a young boy, when you first came to this planet, I tried to teach you the ins and outs of politics. Anakin smiled faintly. I remember that I didn't much care for the lessons. For any lessons, as I recall. But it's a pity. You should have paid more attention. To understand politics is to understand the fundamental nature of thinking beings. Right now, you should remember one of my first teachings. All those who gain power are afraid to lose it. The Jedi use their power for good, Anakin said, a little too firmly. Good is a point of view, Anakin. And the Jedi concept of good is not the only valid one. Take your Dark Lords of the Sith, for example. From my reading, I have gathered that the Sith believed in justice and security every bit as much as the Jedi. Jedi believe in justice and peace. In these troubled times, is there a difference? Palpatine asked mildly. The Jedi have not done a stellar job of bringing peace to the galaxy, you must agree. Who's to say the Sith might not have done better? This is another one of those arguments you probably shouldn't bring up in front of the council, if you know what I mean, Anakin replied with a disbelieving smile. Oh, yes, because the Sith would be a threat to the Jedi Order's power. Lesson 1. Anakin shook his head. Because the Sith are evil. From a Jedi's point of view, Palpatine allowed, evil is a label we put on those who threaten us, isn't it? Yet the Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including the quest for greater power. The Jedi's quest is for greater understanding, Anakin countered, for greater knowledge of the Force, which brings with it greater power, does it not? Well, yes, Anakin had to laugh. I should know better than to argue with the politician. We're not arguing, Anakin, we're just talking. Palpatine shifted his weight, settling in comfortably. Perhaps the real difference between the Jedi and the Sith lies only in their orientation. A Jedi gains power through understanding, and a Sith gains understanding through power. This is the true reason the Sith have always been more powerful than the Jedi. The Jedi fear the dark side so much they have cut themselves off from the most important aspect of life, passion of any kind. They don't even allow themselves to love. Except for me, Anakin thought. But then, I've never been actually exactly the perfect Jedi. The Sith do not fear the dark side. The Sith have no fear. They embrace the whole spectrum of experience. From the heights of transcendent joy to the depths of hatred and despair, beings have these emotions for a reason, Anakin. That is why the Sith are more powerful. They are not afraid to feel. The Sith rely on passion for strength, Anakin said. But when that passion runs dry, what's left? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps a great deal. Perhaps it never runs dry at all, who can say? They think inward, only about themselves. And the Jedi don't. The Jedi are selfless. We erase the self to join with the flow of the Force. We only care about others. Palpatine again gave him that smile of gentle wisdom. Or so you've been trained to believe. I hear the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi in your answers, Anakin. What do you really think? Anakin suddenly found the ballet a great deal more interesting than Palpatine's face. I don't know anymore. It is said that if one could ever entirely comprehend a single grain of sand, really, truly understand everything about it, one would, at the same time, entirely comprehend the universe. Who's to say that a Sith, by looking inward, sees less than a Jedi does by looking out? The Jedi are good, that's the difference. I don't care who sees what. What the Jedi are, Palpatine said gently, is a group of very powerful beings you consider to be your comrades, and you are loyal to your friends. I have known that for as long as I have known you, and I admire you for it. But are your friends loyal to you? Anakin shot him with a sudden frown. What do you mean? Would a true friend ask you to do something that's wrong? I'm not sure if it's wrong, Anakin said. Obi-Wan might have been telling the truth. It was possible. They might only want to catch Sidious. They really might be trying to protect Palpatine. They might, maybe. Have they asked you to break the Jedi Code? To violate the Constitution? To betray a friendship? To betray your own values? Chancellor, think, Anakin. I have always tried to teach you to think. Yes, Jedi do not think. They know. But those stale answers aren't good enough now, in these changing times. Consider their motives. Keep your mind clear of assumptions. The fear of losing power is a weakness of both the Jedi and the Sith. Anakin sank lower in his seat. Okay, I'm going to break here, and then we'll keep going. So, as you can see, there is a crap ton of dialogue that George couldn't fit into the, screen time he needed, and just look how much detail there is in here, like you get the idea and you get the essence in the movie. But this book, he's so much more manipulative than you'd think, and there is a 4-hour cut of this movie somewhere too, like the full thing, but George couldn't release a 4-hour movie because he knows that that's not engaging. 4 hours is too long. So he cut it down, like most filmmakers should. Lord of the Rings, right? But it's genuinely just so, it's the symbolism here. Anakin sinking lower and Palpatine sitting more comfortably. That's a representation of, what's going to happen with Anakin. He's just going to drop to his lowest point as Vader, and Palpatine's going to be able to relax and sit more comfortably, that he has this powerful dog on his leash, right? So that alone is amazing. Anyways, continuing on. Too much had happened in too short of time. Everything jumbled together in his head, and none of it seemed to make complete sense, except for what Palpatine said. That made too much sense. This puts me in mind of an old legend, Palpatine murmured idly. Anakin, are you familiar with the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Ah, I thought not. It is not a story the Jedi would tell you. It's a Sith legend of a Dark Lord who had turned his sight inward so deeply that he had come to comprehend and master life itself. And because the two are one, when seen clearly enough, death itself. Anakin sat up. Was he actually hearing this? He could keep someone safe from death. According to the legend, Palpatine said, he could directly influence the midichlorians to create life with such knowledge. To maintain life in someone already living would seem a small matter, don't you agree? A universe of possibility blossomed inside Anakin's head. He murmured, stronger than death. The dark side seems to be, from my reading, the pathway to many abilities some would consider to be unnatural. Anakin couldn't seem to get his breath. What happened to him? Oh, well, it is a tragedy after all, Once he has gained this ultimate power, he has nothing to fear, save losing it. That's why the Jedi Council brought him to mind, But what happened? Well, to safeguard his power's existence, he teaches the path toward it to his apprentice. And his apprentice kills him in his sleep, Palpatine said with a careless shrug. Plagueis never saw it coming. That's the tragic irony, you see. He can save anyone in the galaxy from death, except himself. What about the apprentice? What happened to him? Oh, him. He goes on to become the greatest Dark Lord the Sith have ever known. So, Anakin murmured, it's only a tragedy for Plagueis. For the apprentice, the legend has a happy ending. Oh, well, yes, quite right. I never really thought of it that way. Rather like what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? What if? Anakin said slowly, almost not daring to speak the words. It's not a legend. I'm sorry. What if Darth Plagueis really lived? What if someone really had this power? Oh, I am rather certain that Plagueis did indeed exist, and if someone actually had this power, well, he would be one of the most powerful men in the galaxy, not to mention virtually immortal. How would I find him? I'm sure I couldn't say. You could ask your friends on the Jedi Council, I suppose, but of course not. If they ever found him, they'd kill him on the spot. Not as a punishment for any crime, you understand. Innocence is irrelevant to the Jedi. They would kill him simply for being Sith, and his knowledge would die with him. I have to. Anakin found himself half out of his seat, fists clenched and trembling. He forced himself to relax and sit back down, and he took a deep breath. You seem to know so much about this, and I need you to tell me. Would it be possible at all, to learn this power? Palpatine shrugged, regarding him with a smile of gentle wisdom. Well, clearly, he said, not from a Jedi. For a long, long time after leaving the opera house, Anakin sat motionless in his idling speeder, eyes closed, resting his head against the edge of his mechanical hand. The speeder bobbed gently in the airwakes of the passing traffic. He didn't feel it. Klaxons blared, rising and fading as angry pilots swerved around him. He didn't hear them. Finally, he sighed and lifted his head. He stroked a private code into the speeder's comm screen. After a moment, the screen lit up with an image of Padme's half-asleep face. Anakin, she rubbed her eyes, blinking. Where are you? What time is it? Padme. I can't. He stopped himself, huffing a sigh out through his nose. Listen, Padme, something's come up. I have to spend the night at the temple. Oh, well, all right, Anakin. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, he swallowed. I miss you already. We'll be together tomorrow? Yes, and soon for the rest of our lives. We'll never have to be apart again. She nodded sleepily. Rest well, my love. I'll do my best. You too. She blew him a kiss, and the screen went blank. Anakin fired thrusters and slid the speeder expertly into traffic, angling toward the Jedi Temple, because that part, the part about spending the night at the temple, was the part that wasn't a lie. The lie was that he was going to rest, that he was going to even try. How could he rest when every time he closed his eyes, he could see her screaming on the birthing table? Now the council's insult burned hotter than ever. He even had a name, a story, a place to start, but how could he explain to the archives master why he needed to research a Sith legend of immortality? Yet maybe he didn't need the archives after all. The temple was still the greatest nexus of force energy on the planet, perhaps even the galaxy, and it was unquestionably the best place in the galaxy for intense, focused meditation. He had much he needed the Force to teach him in a very short time to learn. He would start by thinking inward, thinking about himself. Right there. Darth Plagueis the Wise. Fully fledged, full story by George Lucas, but penned by Matthew Stover. Okay? And George sits with them the entire time they're writing, and he tells them what to do and what to change. So this is very much Matthew's novel as it is George's. You know, like this is really this is George's vision. This is not written by an author where George just approves it. No, George is literally practically writing with Matthew Stover the entire time. And this just shows you the insane, incredible vision of George Lucas for Star Wars. I mean, the amount of complexity in Anakin and conflict in Anakin in that scene alone. And there's plenty of other scenes in that we're going to go through, you know, in Revenge just alone, there's tons. But that just shows how manipulative Palpatine was and how that was the moment where Anakin really started to turn. Because he knew Palpatine was a Sith. He knew there was something off with him. You know, like this wasn't surprising to Anakin, but he let the I guess reasonable and logical side of his brain shut off so that there would be no trigger of him being like, wait, this is the guy, right? So instead, he shuts that part of his brain off and shuts on the, the over-emotional, like, just anxious. He shuts the light off and he shuts the lights off in his brain, right? And now it's just darkness. That's what he does, really. Where he's, his passion and his selfishness and his, anxiety and all of that just floods him in that moment. And, he gets these dreams and he's seeing the one way out. And notice how the dreams get worse the more he thinks he can find a way to save her, because it's really the dreams kind of implemented by the dark side in his mind that, are twisting him. And if he were to beat those dreams, he would never have turned, right? But really, only Qui-Gon's the only one who could train him to do that. He can't just do it himself because he loves her too much and it's too passionate and too out of control and it's too intense. He can't sleep, like the novel said. And this also shows it was a slow turn, this was not just a snap. And I have heard a lot of uneducated people on Star Wars, just say that, oh, he turned too fast, or I think he should have turned a little slower. It's like, no, if you read the book and you actually examine the movie, you'd realize that that's not true. And the writing is just gorgeous. It's like poetry, really, like everything. And there's even aspects of Palpatine's, speech that are true, and how George implemented, those aspects of Palpatine's, I guess not speech, monologue, on purpose to make the audience start getting, manipulated inside. And it works. Because there are things in there that are true. All those who gain power are afraid to lose it. Which is ironic because he's talking about himself there too. Like he's not just, trying to mock the Jedi or trying to, mock someone. No, he's straight up just talking about himself in that moment, which is ironic in itself, And you could save others from death, but not yourself. He's like completely twisting Anakin to be selfish, right? He's saying, well, you should save yourself, and that's the ultimate show of strength, not saving others. And he slides remarks in like that slowly, and it twists and twists and twists and twists Anakin. Like this could be examined by professional psychologists, and they could tell you that it was real and accurate, because reading that for the first time, I remember, is when I really questioned the Jedi. Like, it made me question them because of how well written that is and how it's so obviously not this evil Sith talk. It's not. Like, a lot of it is very smart and prepared, even though, I don't know, I assume it was, just the smart, prepared way of putting it, to where Palpatine throws in these slow, like, little bits of Sith knowledge in there, but he covers it and sugarcoats it with all this, like, innocence and Jedi talk, and how he's really slick and nice about it in the moment, right? He's not like the Jedi are trash and weak, he doesn't phrase it like that. He's like, well, they're too afraid to lose their power, and they're not fully embracing the Force. You see the difference in tone, right? So he's very manipulative. Like, this is manipulation 2000, and this happens in real life too, where people try to manipulate, So it's cool to see how to not let that happen and to read between the lines. Because if you read between the lines, then you'd see the bigger picture and you'd see how he's trying to manipulate you, So that's a great lesson, life lesson in Star Wars, to never just blindly believe what someone's saying, no matter how good it sounds to you. That is a great message implemented by George. And I don't know if that was intentional, but, you know, it's just in general a really good message to hear. But yeah, that portion of Revenge of the Sith is, I think, one of my favorite moments in Star Wars because of just how well it's written. And I'm telling you, this is the speed and pace that the Academy loves. Like, where you sit on a scene forever. And I am telling you, if this whole cut had gotten, you know, released, I think it could have won Best Picture. I'm being honest. I really do. I think it could have, because this is just objectively insanely good writing. Like, insanely good. And I am telling you, it is better writing than The Godfather in this book alone. Okay? Like, I don't understand how people don't see it, if they just don't want to see it or realize it, but like, this is genuinely the most perfect way to write a conflicted hero, right? And it's done pretty much flawlessly. There's never a moment where I'm oh, that was too fast or that was too slow. It's like done very real, you know? It's like there's not these sudden weird things where you're like, oh, this is written and scripted. Like, no, it feels so natural and so human. And that's the magic of George's writing and how just absolutely unparalleled it is. I can't even do that. You know, like, the stuff George is able to do is just not, you can't match it. Like, he's just a genius, you know? It's like, I can match the, you know, I guess the way the Force works, and I can match the Jedi and the Sith. I know all the lore, so nothing would convolute or contradict. I know all the characters really well, and I know, you know, how to shoot Star Wars, how to edit it and pace it. But to write that well is so hard. And you'd think, oh, it's not that hard when you sit down. No. Like, guys, I write all the time, and it is so hard to fit those monologues into your movie without, you know, and write those moments in well, fluidly, and help it blend with the rest of your script. Like, that is incredibly difficult to do. And not to have it be too overbearing, you know, like, it's unbelievable, honestly. Like, just from that alone, what we have from George's story. And this is honestly, the prequel books were really what showed me for the first time when I read them way back in the day. I checked them out from my local library. That is what really blasted George's vision in my face. And that is what made me realize, oh, so this is Star Wars. This is the full story, you know? And that's what made me, I already loved Anakin as a character because he was cool, but then I loved Anakin even more after this because it's just such a just human approach, and it feels so real, you know? Like, this is something that could happen to me, but now I know how to avoid it because of Anakin, you know? And he saved me. So that is just, like, again, amazing in itself and how Star Wars impacts people. But that whole film, again, one of the greatest films ever crafted. Like, just alone, without the book, take the book away, still, you just, again, have to read through the lines. George gives you the fun, fast-paced, you know, action, but the trade-off is you have to now be smart enough to read between the lines. You can't just read the script and look at it blandly like critics. No, you have to read between the lines. You have to watch the movie multiple times. You have to understand, and it makes you think. You know, and I do not like A24 because I feel they're ruining the movie industry. Their whole thing is that, you know, they make you think after all their movies, and how no other, you know, franchise makes you think, and how it's all mumbo jumbo garbage, and that's the only message they spread. And they also spread that, you know, being bad is good. being bad and gray is good. They spread that in like every project. So I think that just goes to show, like, that alone, how it's BS, right? It's all paid off BS, because this is just that times 1,000, and it's morally correct, because you're seeing how wrong it is, and it's blatantly done that way, where you feel you're getting manipulated, but then at the same time, you watch what happens when someone does get fully manipulated and how effed it is. So then you think back and you're like, maybe what he said earlier wasn't true. And then you read between the lines, you're like, it was not true. So you experience that gray feeling, but then you see the bad and you don't feel with the bad, and that's a good moral telling of a story. You're not like, oh, maybe you should agree with Anakin that he killed the kids. Like, no, that's the whole point, is you're not supposed to agree with that. It's like when Anakin killed the Tuskens, I understood him in that moment, because seeing your mom get slaughtered for no reason by these, animals that just kind of do this for fun and for no reason. If I had the power of Anakin, let's be honest, most of us probably would just go ham, right? Now I wouldn't, because, again, I saw what happens when you do, and I saw the consequences. But if I were in that situation, I probably would go ham on a few of them. Maybe not the whole camp, but I understand Anakin there. It's not good. I don't love that he did that, but I'm not going to say, you're an evil Sith because you slaughtered the whole camp. No, that's not, it's just was a fit of rage over a slaughter, which again is not, they did just murder his mom for no reason. Who knows what else they were going to do to her, and just continue to beat her and maybe, who knows, she was by a campfire. I don't know if they were going to eat her or something. I don't know how Tuskens act, but, that's another show of, like, kind of moral grayness that the audience can understand for a bit, right? In that moment where he's looking out at the Tuskens with that, like, just furious face with the John Williams strings just playing that, again, playing the voice of the Force, and, like, just the rage and the dark side energy just ramps and ramps with those, like, intense, string movements and the pitch changing all the time. Like, in that moment, you're like, oh, you go get him. And then when he actually does, it's like, oh, nice. And then you see Yoda and you're like, oh, this is bad. And then you hear his thing, I killed not just the men, but the women and the children too. And you're like, ooh, never mind, that was really bad. So that's another, I guess, show of the moral gray to just wrong, But yeah, just seeing Anakin developed that well and just put together that well is a really good example for how Star Wars really isn't a shallow franchise, and this is the thing that the prequels really introduced the most. The originals are pretty complex, but the prequels ramp it up 1,000 notches in terms of complexity, and that's what the critics didn't like, is they just thought of Star Wars as a petty kids franchise. And then when the prequels came around and they're for adults, they flipped the lid, and they freaked out. They're like, what? How is it, becoming part of the greats? We're like, we can't let this happen because it has positive values and messages and things that'll actually make people good and think. They're like, we can't have that in mainstream Hollywood, because that's never what mainstream Hollywood pushes, ever. They always push, more. And these days, what's pushed is moral grayness and evil. That's all the movies that are Best Picture and have all these prestigious awards are for that reason alone. So they saw that, they flipped out, and then they, had to review, the critics had to do a review bomb because they didn't want them getting, they didn't want it to be too successful, and they didn't let it win any Oscars, because there are, Hollywood is screwed like that, unfortunately, and it's just something that you as a filmmaker, which like I am, I'm going to have to, navigate through, because I tell positive stories. Maybe there's a bad ending, but it still has good moral character, and that's something that from George and from obviously my religion that I've learned is vital to telling stories. It's, if you don't have that moral compass, people get inspired by the wrong characters. But then, with that said, I wanted to back up what I'm about to say. When I said, you say Anakin's my hero and how I've always looked up to him, people were weird. They're like, how would you look up to this guy who got manipulated so easily, slaughtered kids, and was a complete psychopath, and just lost it over a girl? I'm like, how? They're like, how is that, your role model, your hero? It's because he saved me from a lot of those things. Obviously not killing kids. That's, are you kidding me? That's objectively horrible, but getting over passionate in a relationship and getting manipulated easily and, diving too far in extremes, like all of those things, I learned from him, and he showed me what happens when you dive into those things and how I shouldn't do that. That is just as valuable as seeing a hero be good. Just as valuable, because now I saw, wait, this is what happens if I do this, and this is bad, right? So it's the same level of heroism, just from a different perspective. Because again, it maintains the moral compass, right? And that's what is good. It has the light and it has the dark. And that's something in Star Wars that, real Star Wars, that is always there. Is there's always this morally good and there's this morally bad. And that's always, constantly shifting, right? So, you're inspired by the good just as you're, taught by the bad. It's this very complex and interesting, balance, and how you see how the dark side just unbalances everything, and how it wreaks havoc, which is why you should always maintain with the light and be a good person, because that's the only way to really achieve balance. And that's what Leslie Headland didn't understand when she made Acolyte, is she thought that you need an even amount of dark and an even amount of light to maintain balance. That's also what kind of The Last Jedi taught, at the same time. So they don't understand the Force, and George has said that Disney doesn't understand, and it makes sense, because it's for those reasons. They don't understand that balance means there is no darkness and that you are with the light, and dark side's the only thing that goes in there and mucks everything up, George has said that himself. So you see the unbalance, and you see how screwed it is, and you see how it really is unbalanced, and that's not the way you want to live. And then you see the light, and you're like, ooh, that is how I want to live, And of course, that doesn't mean that every Jedi is perfect, and every Jedi you should look up to, and that's not what I'm saying, because there are Jedi who are just stupid, and like just complete idiots, and ignorant idiots as well, like Kiadi, and all those council people, like they just don't, other than Plo Koon, because he was just kind of wrecked by the end of the prequels through all the crap he's been through, and I guess he didn't speak out a lot because he was just destroyed inside. That's what I think. He just has been through so much, and he's trying to just remain calm, and which is what a Jedi should do, and not to burst and not to be, too divisive, and he's just trying to lay back. Obviously that doesn't work, but he's the one council member that I respected, and Yoda just was confused, and he was lost, and he didn't know, what was going on, because the dark side just completely clouded his mind, which happened to the whole council. But Yoda at least knew in his gut that there was something off, and then realized, crap, there was something off when Order 66 happened. But you have Kiadi, who's just like, thinks, oh, everything the council does is godly, and it's like just this pure goodness, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, that every Jedi is such an amazing, positive role model, because that's not true. But there are plenty of Jedi who are, like Yoda, like Luke, like Anakin, like Plo Koon, there's a ton. And there's also anti-role models, like Darth Vader, like Anakin, like Darth Maul, Kylo Ren. Even though the sequels are garbage, again, it's the same concept because they really ripped from Vader. So, with Kylo, because it's just a garbage story, but you get the point. Like, if you really want to look at him, you can, because he does have that same aspect of the weird, like, moral gray, unbalanced conflict thing that kind of goes on and how screwed it is. Except Disney, again, they weren't as morally straight because it's Disney. It's not George, who's genuinely a morally straight guy. It's the weird division. So I wouldn't say Kylo because he's a mess. But you get my point. Those like dark side characters who have had kind of tragic backstories, like Baylan Skoll or Shin Hati or Star Killer. Just all those characters. You see, I'd say, Revan, obviously. Jeez, I'm an idiot. I don't know. There's just so many of them. I'm going through all of the characters in my head. Even in ways, you just see Darth Malak, and again, the hunger for power that he had, and how he just kind of betrayed Revan, and, that whole thing. And him losing his jaw over being an idiot, in a fight. There's just all these, even the dark side characters that you can look at and learn from. It's just the moral, I guess, the dilemmas and just consistency of Star Wars is unmatched. And these days, everyone's into the gray characters and how they think they're good and amazing people because they're gray and they're independent and they don't believe in any ideas and they just believe in themselves. That's selfishness, that's darkness. That's the dark side, except they have the light in them too, so it's this mixture. But that doesn't make them, people to constantly be looking up to and to, want to be morally gray. That's not a good thing. You should always want to be on the light. That should always be your main, goal. And if you're not, that's a problem. You should get help. Legitimately, if you're, drawn towards the dark side and you're, intrigued in that, that's a problem. And I mean, you just watch Revenge of the Sith and you see how screwed it is. From that passage alone, you see how morally just wrong and destructive to Anakin that was. But again, some people, they don't see it. It's just this it's okay. I'm just gonna, sneak my way into the darkness and I won't change that much. But it's not true. It destroys you as a person. Every step you take, no matter how little it is, it's a step. And it's 20 times harder to take that little step back to the light. That's always how it is, And if you make bad decisions, which everyone does, how hard it is to kind of reverse that and try to correct it. It's so much harder than making that bad decision, which reflects back to, the dark side's the quick and easy selfish path, where the Jedi path is the, the opposite. It's the complete opposite of that. So all of that, the good, the bad, the balance, the unbalance, it's all crammed together in that one sequence with Darth Plagueis the Wise, and how you see Anakin, bouncing around balance and unbalance, and how the scales are like this, they're like balance, unbalance, and it's just constantly shifting. And Palpatine is just so unbalanced that he's comfortable. And that is when you are completely on. Is Vader, he was never fully comfortable. He was like this. He was unbalanced by a lot, but he wasn't scale on the floor unbalanced like Palpatine, where he's just evil is good. He's not like that. that's a different level. You know, that's a point of you can't save someone, is when they've hit that point. Like Luke couldn't, there's no way. Like, he's just, Palpatine, like Georgia said, is just the representation of pure evil. And that's what we see in there too. And how the scales shift, and how, you know, like the, I guess, sitting in your seat, device, that's the word. The whole, like, seat-sitting device that Matthew Stover used and George used, was really to show, I guess, the comfort in darkness, and how Palpatine is sitting comfortably, and how he's like, you know, he's all good. He's already down there. It's fine. And he's just getting more comfortable in it. Where Anakin is sinking, and they use the word sinking. You know, he sinks into his seat in those moments where he's, you know, mentally descending to the dark side. He's, you know, sitting and sinking more into his seat, right? And then we see how he sits up and balls his fists, and he's angry, right? We saw that too, which is what the Sith do. They try to bend the Force to their will, and that's how they're able to do all the crazy powers they do, because they force the Force to do it. But it has backfires, right? They age quicker, they get disfigured earlier. That's why Palpatine's face is a mess by Return of the Jedi, and it's like a disaster, because he's not just using Force lightning, he's using the Force to manipulate the entire galaxy. That's how powerful he is, and he's just like, it ages you and drains you so fast. So again, the quick and easy path that leads to quicker failure, you know, that's the dark side. And we see that with Palpatine, and how he's just sitting there comfortably while Anakin is sinking into it, you know, while the scale is tipping and tipping and tipping, right? Like, that's what you see, you know. And no matter, let's say you're tipped all the way down, you have this temptation of light up here, right? Because from the other scale that is trying to, you know, it wishes that it could pull you up, but really the only way to let that, you know, balance happen, and to let the dark side release, and for it to be filled with light, is, you know, you listening to that, you know, temptation up there, and just, you know, giving it that little push and oomph, and you're like this, and now the scales go boom, right? So that's cool too. But Palpatine, you know, his scales are like decaying and old, and all the light is flown out of that other, you know, part of the scale. It's just gone, you know, like he's just completely let it drain out, because he's pure evil, you know. So I don't know, the whole idea of good and evil in Star Wars is probably one of my favorite aspects about Star Wars. Probably my favorite thematic aspect of Star Wars. That's what you know, really intrigues me, is the Force and the good and evil. That's like the piece of Star Wars themes that I just love the most. You know, it's not, well, the character development, well, of course that, but I love that, but that kind of correlates with good and evil and how that shifts. But my point being is, I'm not like, does this, use of blah 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 in the script equal this piece of blah 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 in the script, and how blah 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 blah. Like, no, it's all of that is there. The blah 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 is there, but that's junk. That doesn't matter. What I guess what I'm trying to say is the takeaway from Star Wars to me isn't just, oh, that was so cool, or oh, that was so good. It's this moral story that I see, in this story about good and evil that I see and witness, and see how either it goes good or goes bad, or both, you know, and I take away lessons from those situations and apply them to my own life. That's what's I'd say most important about Star Wars that Disney hasn't captured once. Not in Mando, nowhere. That's the one thing, because they don't know how the Force works. That's the thing. They don't know how to tip the scales, and that's completely gone now too with the Acolyte. Is Leslie's basically implanted in the horrible canon that Disney has, that, you know, you have to equal out light and dark in yourself, you know? It's like, that's not true. You shouldn't want darkness in you. You shouldn't want half of darkness in you. No. You should fight the dark. That's always what you should do, is fight the dark, you know? And just embrace that you have darkness in you that you need to work on, that you need to, you know, work on removing. And that's what, you know, why Luke wears black robes, is because he's just accepts that I have problems. You know, I'm not the perfect Jedi, and I need to, you know, grow more and discipline myself more in the light in order to not become my father. So that's kind of symbolic of that, and how when he saves his father, the flap opens in his robes, and it's like a white grayish color, because it shows that the light ultimately won and broke through in himself, right? So that's the symbolism there, and how after Return of the Jedi, his robes get less and less dark. They get, you know, more ornate and more, you know, Jedi looking, you know, throughout Legends, until they, you know, become white again, right? So that's what's cool. Not white, but, you know, Jedi colored. And then, of course, there's Dark Empire, where he has to, you know, fake that he's dark, you know, part of the dark side in order to save, you know, the peeps and all of that. But I won't get into that. That's a whole nother video I could make. But yeah, so that is definitely my takeaway. Light and dark was done perfectly in that scene and in Revenge of the Sith. And that's probably the most complex use of light and dark in all of Star Wars, really. Like, it just is. You don't see that, the complexity of morals, more than in Revenge of the Sith, because every character's at a different state. Obi-Wan, he's balanced. Like, he is balanced, right? Where Padme, she's pretty balanced too. You know, she's there. Yoda, he's balanced. And then you see Anakin, who's all over the place. And you see Palpatine, who is complete opposite of Obi-Wan. He is not balanced whatsoever. He's completely out of balance. And then you have, you know, just tons of other characters who, I'd say even Mace's scales, I'd say, were tipping sometimes, because of, you know, how aggressive he fights and how aggressive he is, you know, sometimes. I'd say he would even, like, his scales would, you know, kind of shake a little sometimes, I feel like, which is interesting. But yeah, the moral, I guess, complexity and I guess opposition of all the different characters is really cool to see on screen, and you learn from all of them too. So yeah, awesome. So that is the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, explained by George and Matthew Stover in his novel Revenge of the Sith, and a breakdown of the moral complexity of Star Wars, all in one video, which is great. So thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, share. I will see you in the next one. And always remember, your focus determines your reality. May the Force be with you.